Yeah, this is Synik on PEPR, Zimbabwean MC, representing that hip hop that's been branded as conscious on occasion, but it's just me telling my story.
This is Radio Freedom.
If you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything.
Come on! Listen!
Planet Earth, planet rap. Planet Earth, planet rap. Planet Earth, planet rap. The only segment show and station in the hip hop world playing the hip hop world. In the hip hop world playing the hip hop world. With Miko and I'm
Hello and welcome to our most recent offering of PEPR, Planet Earth, Planet Rap podcast series.
Yes, PEPR is part of Chuck D's and You Don't Stop radio show. We've been part of it for over 11 years now, I think, and we've been playing hip-hop from all continents from around the world. That's sort of our MO.
Yes, and my name is Amkelwa Vayolam Kapanen, and I'm here with Mikko Kapanen. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very well, you know. I'm so happy and excited to be actually doing these things because it's really something a little bit new for us. We've been doing this thing for a while, but this is something a little bit new.
It is true. I mean, we've come a long way. 11 years is a long time. And there has had to be some evolution and progress. I remember when we first started, we were focusing mainly on music and the context and the countries that we were focused on specifically. And then it evolved into something more with voice notes from around the world. And now, this is true because what Chuck D was saying some long time ago in some interview was that when hip-hop artists especially are invited to talk shows, TV talk shows, and they're invited there to perform, but they are not really ever or not very often invited on the couch, you know, to share their ideas and share their opinions and to be interviewed there. This is our couch. This is when we invite some of our favorite artists from around the world on the couch. You know what I actually was thinking about? I was thinking not only are we getting an opportunity to get more insight into the artists that we've been supporting and playing all along these years, but also I think the artists themselves get an opportunity to meet us and to get to know the people behind PEPR after all these years. Yes.
That's also true. That's a good point. You know, that's a good point. And it's, you know, it's nice. It's very exciting. I'm very happy to be here, part of this.
So it's a kind of a meet and greet. And our guest today is the incomparable none other than Synik from Zimbabwe.
Absolutely, Synik from Zimbabwe. We got to know him and his music, you know, a long time ago, 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, perhaps, you know, just from a distance. And he was living in Zimbabwe and made his first album in Zimbabwe. But now I guess 5 years ago, but he's made the move to Lisbon, to Portugal.
Yes. As said, we've known him, or we feel like we've known him. He's been a part of our lives. We've been a part of his life since time immemorial, it feels like. And I remember when first we spoke to him in 2011, it was while he was still in Zimbabwe. Yes.
Yeah. And you wrote an article about him, which then ended up being in the Guardian as well. So, you know, we've been dealing with the matter at hand for a while now.
It's been a long enough time, and today we get the opportunity to speak to Synik from Zimbabwe. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, nice to see you guys.
Likewise, right?
Yeah.
Happy 2022.
Oh, wow. Yeah, happy 2022 to you too.
Thank you.
Cool.
My friend?
Yeah, no, it's all good. Are you all right? Have you sort of like been rushing or have you had a good day?
It was a good day, I think. Just work and the usual.
The daily grind.
The daily grind, exactly. What about on
People
that side?
talk about it like it's a good thing, you know, like they're like, yeah, the daily grind. Like, you shouldn't be grinding.
It is what it is, though. It is what it is. Until something changes, we gotta grind, you know?
I know. How is Lisbon?
It's nice. It's beautiful. Getting a little bit warmer.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a beautiful vibe.
Yeah. And how long has it been so far since you've been here?
5 years.
My gosh.
Time flies.
I know, right?
I was like, what? It's been 5 years. Like, where does the time go, you know?
That's half a decade.
It is. Real story.
How are you finding it? Like how are you finding like living there?
It's all right. Like it's a beautiful place. Like I mean, in terms of like the weather, it's great. There's a bit of a scene in terms of live music and stuff. So culturally, like it's a good vibe. Yeah, like having the ocean nearby is also lovely.
You lucky fish. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's a good vibe. Definitely, it's really good. Like the food. Also, like I think the cost of living is kind of decent as well. So
is it reasonable?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh man.
And how is your Portuguese coming?
Oh, that's
if I may
that's
ask.
the one thing where I'm kind of embarrassed, man. Like after 5 years, I was like, I should be somewhere else, but yeah, it's kind of bad.
Don't be embarrassed.
How are you doing with the language?
Scandalous.
No.
The goalpost.
No way.
The goalpost keeps shifting. So
no way. I thought you were fluent. What are you talking about?
It's a work in progress. It is not an easy task.
I hear you.
You know, the thing about learning a foreign language is that it really depends also on how do you express yourself and how much do you want to express yourself. Because there are people who don't speak much or who are perfectly happy with having very little to say anyway. All that they care about is the basic kind of stuff. And for those people, it's much quicker to get into the kind of fluency of what they will ever need. But then you have people like, you know, I'm Kelly here and you're a poet and all that. So it's like knowing a language that you really feel like you know a language.
Yeah.
That's a little bit further away than for somebody who only thing that they need to answer is that do you need a plastic bag and do you have a bonus card in your shop cashier? No,
that's definitely true. I think one of the reasons why I've struggled a little bit with Portuguese is there are a lot of expats out here. So a lot of the people I interact with some Portuguese people, but then there are also people from all around the world. So usually I get by completely fine with English. Yeah.
Exactly. That's my shortcome as well. I mean, it's a blessing in disguise, but it's also not quite a blessing.
It's not quite.
It sets me back like a long distance. But you know, if we spoke French, perhaps we would have to speak the language of the land.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
we couldn't land on English.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it was something else, yeah.
So the first time I spoke to you when was this? Was when you released Sin City.
So that's 10 years. So you're like 5 years is half a decade. Since Sin City, that's already a decade.
That's too long, right?
It's been a long time.
So much has happened.
Tell me,
what has the evolutionary process of your music been like since that time? If you can even trace it that far back.
Man. I don't know. I think the main thing that's happened between then and now is kind of trying to learn to be more self-sufficient in terms of making the music, because when I look at Sin City as a project, like I had so many people around me, like producers and stuff like that. And then when I left and, you know, like it was, 5 years ago and I was in this place, I didn't have any of those connections anymore. So it was like, if I'm going to make music, then I have to kind of figure out a way to make it myself, like, create the compositions so I can do the raps. So I think that's one of the main things. In terms of like my content or like how like the kind of rap that I'm trying to do, I don't think there's been much of a difference. Or maybe in the sense that I think when I did Sin City, like I was still like a rapper. And being a rapper, it's like sometimes there's a bit of that. Yeah, I'm a rapper. You're pushing that ego. But I think over time, and maybe it's growing older, and some of the situations that I found myself in since I left home, like I think life kind of humbled me in a sense. So like there's a lot less of the rapper. It's more like this is me, this is where I am, these are my struggles, this is what's going on. It's I think in a sense my music has become more introspective and more therapeutic.
To me, it's very interesting that you don't necessarily think that it has changed a lot, because we were just talking today when we were preparing for this, was saying how much it has changed. Because like Sin City was a kind of like it was kind of Harare record, and it was like it had like and you were 10 years younger, like
10 years younger, true.
Like, life humbles you between I don't even know exactly how old you are now, and then but life humbles you in 10 years.
10 years older.
Yeah, I am too.
Win a lottery. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter the circumstances, but life has a tendency to humble you somehow.
Yeah, it does.
Feel
It
like
does.
10 years ago, I was a very different person in many ways.
It does.
But I was thinking that like right now, I mean, we've been listening to your forthcoming album.
Yeah.
Which is really great. It's very beautiful.
Oh wow!
And
Thank you.
And there's a certain vulnerability there. Do you think that when you were during the time of Sin City, would you have been listening to record like the a travel card for the broken that is now coming out? Do you think that would have been what would you have thought 10 years ago of this album?
I don't know. I feel like I still would have appreciated it. I think in terms of like the sound or the kind of instrumentals that ended up being the foundation of Sin City, that was really a lot of it was like the team that I had. So like the sound was shaped in a certain way, but in terms of like the kind of hip hop that I've listened to for a long time, maybe not from the very beginning, but at some point in time when I discovered like that intersection between neo soul and hip hop, like the Soulquarians and stuff like that, like some of my favorite MCs. I think that's been music that I've been listening to since, and in a sense, like a travel guide for the broken comes from that tradition. Like it's a lot of jazzy kind of hip hop in terms of the music, and the rhymes. I don't know. I feel like it seems like the MC that I was trying to evolve into, like all this time when I look back at the stuff that I was doing earlier. So in the one sense, it's like you said, life humbling me. In the other sense, it's also like maybe just becoming older and like being able to express myself differently. But I think I would have appreciated a travel guide even 10 years ago. I think I would have.
I think you would have. Mm-hmm. And of course, like Mick was saying, that with Sin City, it was more of a Harare album.
Definitely.
And now with this one, I feel like it chronicles the life and times of somebody in the diaspora.
It does.
Is that correct?
It does.
And how has relocating impacted your life musically and otherwise? And what do we mean by this life humbling one?
I mean, I'm trying not to get into specifics, but
yes.
But it wasn't easy. Leaving home.
It never is.
Yeah. So.
By the way, before you go further, let me just say, when I was talking about life humbling you or life humbling me or anybody, I just feel like when you were grow older, you mature, you just sort of realize that, okay, it wasn't quite as I thought. And that in and of itself is a kind of humbling experience in a very beautiful way. So, I mean, I understand that we've all had our life and times, but but it wasn't meant as a kind of like a...
No, it's okay. There are shattered illusions as one gets older. Like, it's natural for your, it's good
for your development.
Illusions get shattered as you get older.
Yeah.
But then I also understand from my own personal experience that the journey from, in my case, South Africa to Finland and living here over the years has had a humbling effect on me. So I wanted to speak a little bit more about your take.
My take.
On your experience in the diaspora.
Okay. I think one of the first things that I'll just say from the get-go is it wasn't easy in the beginning. And even now, like 5 years later, like I'm still trying to, find my place. And it's that thing of, like, for example, like in Portugal, there aren't a lot of Zimbabweans, there's very few of us. So it's like starting over in a place where even like your traditional support networks, that's completely gone. And then also the fact that this is a country where I don't speak the language. So that's been a struggle in a sense. But yeah, just trying to establish yourself and start from zero and make connections and, just be in a place where you feel like, you're kind of settling in. That's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
On this album, I think, if I'm not completely wrong, I think there's a song, Way Back Home. I wonder if it was that song, and you're talking about how there was like a Ugandan neighbor, or you are like getting some generic African food from somewhere. It's a bit expensive and not that nice, but it's kind of like it connects you to something. How has your Africanness changed? Because you're coming from specific country, Zimbabwe, you come from Harare, and then all of a sudden, you maybe you lose the specificity of it in a bigger scheme of things, but to the outside world certainly, but not to yourself. But what happens within?
Okay, I think this is more something that I kind of discovered the first time I came to Europe, which was like I think 2013 or 2014. So I'd gone to Germany and I passed through Austria. One thing that I did notice was, while in Africa, like we may focus on our borders a lot, when you're out here, like I think the borders kind of disappear, and seeing another African, it's like almost like an immediate connection. So I think that's been one of the things that I realized, that I think borders are something that we hang on to a lot more when we're in our individual countries, but out here, like there's that need to connect with just someone from the motherland, and just meeting. Like I'm always interested when I see like a person from a different African country, and it's like, oh, okay, this is cool.
You get to meet the rest of Africa when you go out of the continent.
Yeah.
It is quite a very edifying experience and enlightening, because I think most of us don't know exactly how many commonalities there exist between people of African countries until we leave the African continent, I've been listening to like so many of your tracks, and I listened to the whole album, and then you were alluding to like ancestral guidance, like things that I relate to, and I was like, whoa, I thought this is South African type of thought.
Now we're together, sis. We're together.
I was like, I hear you. Simunye. And I wanted to ask you, what does Dai Shiri Shiri Dai Bururuka mean?
Because you have that in that Bongo Muffin song, right?
We've got this song.
The Bongo Muffin, yeah.
Yes,
No.
Kura Uone.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
So Kura Uone comes back to that idea of life humbling you, because it's like grow up and you will see, So that's what that says. But I also say it in the first line. It's like if I was a bird, I'd fly away. That's what it means. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so, as I've been listening to A Travel Guide for the Broken, to me it occurred that I'm interacting with it from where I'm at, from my own spiritual perspective, perhaps. Like they say with art, the art reveals the observer or the viewer. It's subject to interpretation, but it reveals the one who's looking at it. I wanted to ask, the title itself, does it apply or allude to any traveling, which is like in the interiority as well as externally?
I think I sort of allude to the idea of brokenness in different parts of the album. Like the intro song, like the first song, Rukuvute, which means umbilical cord. The chorus says Makati Guranayo Namo, which means you broke us with hardship. And in that sense, like I'm speaking particularly to the leadership of my country. So you'll find that Zimbabweans have had to scatter, and they're all over the world. And I think the environment and the way it devolved has sort of like led to a sense of a broken people. And it's funny because I was looking on Facebook, and there's a brother that I follow on Facebook, and I don't know what had happened in this particular instance, but he was lamenting the fact that, we are broken people now because of, the situation. So that was one of the things, the fact that, we're coming from this place and the environment has forced us to leave. So that was kind of the idea of brokenness. And then there's also the idea, like, I think for me personally, there's a lot of music, especially in hip hop, that's talking about winning. But in that particular time in life, where I was and what was going on in my life, I just wasn't winning. And I kind of felt like, kind of broken in that sense. So there are like two parts of the journey of leaving home because, the situation is not so great. And also like life kind of breaking you in a sense and trying to heal through that. I think basically that's where the title is coming from.
Yeah, I do think that the theme of healing runs through the whole album, at least for me. In every song that I listened to, I was thinking, yes, this is very healing. And you say it that, you use words as salve and music as medicine. And I thought, yes, how phenomenal. I mean, Mick told me, he said, you know what, you just need to listen to the album and all the questions will come.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yes.
There's a vulnerability in your lyrics, and this is maybe what I was also referring to when I was talking about, like, everything that has been happening in 10 years and all that stuff, and the way you're chronicling your experience. That's really very powerful. Now, as I know myself, and probably you two also, growing up with hip hop, there's a lot of sort of machismo. There's a lot of like, you were talking about this idea of winning, and all of that stuff. How have you sort of navigated the hip hop culture growing up with the kind of like the attitude and maybe the braggadocio with the kind of music that then you also now doing yourself? Has that been a journey? Or did it just sort of like, is it something that you were struggling earlier, or how did you come to this point?
I think initially I sort of emulated the same kind of vibe when it comes to the hip hop that I was doing starting out, because I really thought that's what hip hop was, So when you're introduced to just one certain aspect of it, and then you think that's hip hop, and you're trying to get into it, like you'll definitely kind of emulate that. But I think the one thing that I struggled with as an individual, like in hip hop, was the disconnect between, the the machismo and the whole I'm winning, I'm the best or whatever, with my reality. So so I think that split, or like that gap between the person that I may have projected in records at times and what was actually going on in my reality, I think it led me further down a path where I tried to tell my story more. And I think it also came about with being introduced to other forms of hip hop that aren't really necessarily like that thing, like, because there's so much hip hop, but when you're coming up and you're listening to mainstream hip hop, you're gonna encounter like a certain kind of vibe. But being introduced to like the other MCs that I now listen to, it was like, okay, I can talk about all these different things, and I don't have to project myself as this character or whatever, and I think the vulnerability has been one of the things that I come back to, because especially even when I look back at Sin City, and maybe we talked about this 10 years ago, but some of the records that connected the most with people, it was because like I just expressed my reality, like songs like Muripo, and talking about my family and how my mother was away for so many years and I hadn't seen her in like 14 years at the time. And then you'd hear other people talking about, wow, this is my story. And so in that sense, it was like the vulnerability led me to find that, there's so much connecting us if we talk about like different issues in our music as well.
Absolutely. And I think for me, when I was listening to this particular album, I could sort of hear my story and hear other people's story who have relocated, who have left home, coming to, elsewheres, new elsewheres, to find what we hope are greener pastures, but discover that, it's not smooth sailing. Right.
It's not.
How have you navigated this new reality?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. That's a good question. But I think the answer has been in making connections. Like, finding your people. I think because one of the things that I struggle with, like, I actually left home with my brother, so I always had someone with me like throughout the experience.
That's great.
But eventually connecting with people who, just kind of, for whatever reason, maybe it was music. A lot of the connections that I made ended up being through music. But then I found, even though like the situation was kind of turbulent, I would have like some of these safe spaces just to be myself, and that was definitely a blessing. It hasn't been easy for sure.
It's a work in progress, right? Because it's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
It's not like, it's not something you can say, well, I finally cracked the code. It's like years.
Do you think that you would have been able to, or would it have been like significantly more difficult, or more or less the same, to go through these experiences without being able to express yourself? Because I mean, you're very lucky that you have the outlet that you can write, you can make songs, art from your experiences, and that. How do you reckon it would have been without that outlet?
I definitely think it would have been difficult, because the music, especially this album, like the moment I started creating it, like it was a way for me to figure things out, so I feel like if I didn't have the outlet of music, it would have been very difficult for me to process, some of the things that were happening in my life at the time, and also apart from the music itself being a medicine, so to speak. Music, like I mentioned, music has been the one thing that has connected me with people in a lot of ways, but also particularly in this space. Like, most of my friends are musicians or producers or MCs and people I connect with in jams and open mics and things like that. So music was it made things a lot easier for me. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. It's easier to find your tribe.
Exactly.
That way.
That's it. Yeah.
So the most basic question:
Okay.
What inspired this album?
Leaving home. Leaving home inspired the album. So I basically started working on it pretty much the moment that I left home, and like I was saying that that I no longer had the connection to the producers that I had back home, so it kind of propelled me into the space of kind of learning basic production and stuff like that. But the stories that came out, invariably, each one of them was sort of around this theme. And while on Sin City, like some of the songs were straight up taken out of my life, on this one, I kind of hid behind the stories a little bit. I kind of made them stories that could be anyone. And some of the inspirations are particular people. Like I know, for example, like the character in The Way Back Home, who's going back home after so many years, and he's going to his parents' gravesite, and he wasn't there when they were buried. Like it's people that I know whose parents were buried while they were out here and things like that. So
away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it was all the idea of leaving home.
And it's quite relatable. Like I said, I could recognize parts of myself in that, and I could recognize other people's stories in it. And I thought that, well, this is a very telling chronicles of the life of people when they leave home. But then you also talk about home is not limited to the idea of locality, like geographical locality. It's also about being able to be at home in your skin. Can you elaborate on that for us?
I think that's been one of the questions that that I've battled with since leaving home, as home as defined as a geographical location. It's been the question of what is home really, because if you're out here, is home like when you have four walls and a roof, like a place to stay? Do you feel at home after so many years in a foreign land? It's like, what is home really? And on that particular point, like I was just trying to say that at the end of the day, we're always going to have ourselves. Like, this is who you are, and this is what you have, and you're navigating through this world as this, so home is, this shell that you're walking in as you're interacting with the world. And you have to find peace in navigating the world as you are. And I think it also comes to the issue, maybe the issue of race, because as an African, when you come out here, I don't want to say that we don't interact with the concept of race back home, because we do, but it manifests in a different way. But when you're an African in a predominantly not African space, there is the issue of microaggressions and how people interact with you as a black person.
Yes, it has social and political consequences.
Exactly. So that's why I was trying to say, be comfortable in your skin, because, this is your home, even if the world may look at you in a certain way because of, your home, basically.
As long as you're in your skin and you feel comfortable in your skin, wherever you are is home.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
So
I love
is it
how
something?
you put that.
Is it something that you feel like? Do you feel at home there, or is it something that you are like working on?
Wow, that's a good question. To be honest, I'd say it's a work in progress. Yeah, I think it's a work in progress. I think it's something that we work on. Yeah.
there used to be this kind of idea of I don't know, maybe it's still there, maybe I'm just sort of like not so much part of that conversation, but there used to be like a conversation like, oh, this is African hip hop and this is European hip hop and this is like a Spanish speaking hip hop or French or whatever, like this is UK hip hop, and of course those things kind of apply, you know, where they apply. But I've always said that if you need to understand the migration in Europe and if you want to understand all those things, you need to listen to the European hip hop because those are the stories oftentimes told from those vantage points, and it kind of like clarifies the situation. Those are the stories that you don't hear in the news or in maybe even so much in the books, maybe more so these days than even 10 years ago or 5 years ago or so. But nevertheless, do you feel like, are you still African hip hop? Does it matter? Are you European hip hop? Are you like how do you feel about these things?
What kind of hip hop are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, what kind of hip hop are you, man? Like, well, what is this? What is this you're making? No, it's a good question.
Is that an acoustic guitar?
Yeah, like, what is this acoustic hip hop, man? Folk hip hop. No, I think that's also something that I really struggle with in this current time, because I find myself in this place where if I'm going to talk about the stories that I'm going through, maybe most of the people, like, let's say if I have to perform out here, maybe, for example, like a travel guide for the broken, like if I think about some of the spaces that I perform in, I think that maybe people won't relate to it because it's a particular story.
Yes.
And then in the sense of like back home, like Zimbabwean hip hop, I'm also disconnected from what's going on there. But I still try to, you know, be a part of the conversation in different ways. So it's like I'm still trying to figure out whether I'm African, Zimbabwean hip hop, African hip hop, or now I'm, you know, diaspora hip hop, or I mean, this album could be immigrant hip hop. I don't know. It's like
I mean, yeah.
What kind of hip hop is it exactly? I can't say, but when I look at like some of the other projects that I've done, and it's just hip hop. So in that sense, it's just relatable. It's just global hip hop. Like I think I did an EP with a friend from here called Best Served Chilled, and I was just rapping, you know, and it wasn't really going too deep into my kind of story and stuff like that. So in that sense, it's just hip hop, I guess.
Was that the Solstice? Was that where you had the Goodbye song?
So Solstice was a previous EP. That one it was done with an Austrian producer, Phil Chronics. Yeah, so actually it only came out in 2019, but I pretty much started working on it like 2013 or something. For some reason, like now I can't even remember why the delays, but it ended up coming out like a lot later than it should have. So you can hear in Goodbye, like that was before I left home and I was considering leaving home, and I was like, it's like, yeah. It was kind of like that bridge between Sin City and a travel guide for the broken.
Yes.
I was just about to say that if you need to understand the change, maybe that particular song explains that, because you're really explaining. And what I'm saying, when you are saying that you're kind of like not sure if people relate, and I guess people have different way of relating. It's not necessarily always so concrete or whatever. You can also like relate to things also as on a more metaphorical level, or kind of like just use them as an example. So, but I really, when I really find, especially this new album, the reason why it's so powerful is because it will tell you the story or the thought process or the emotional process, the spiritual process, whatever processes, all of the processes that are involved in leaving your country, coming to another country, the specificity of like coming from Africa to Europe. There's a lot of different dynamics there at play. And for somebody who doesn't even know what that means, you are telling it in a very beautiful way. I mean, you might read it in between the lines that I think this is an amazing album, and
you.
I know that a lot of the people. I don't know if it's gonna be if this episode is gonna be out before the album is gonna be out or whatever it is. But like, I don't even know if I have a question. But I think, I just need to sort of feel like I needed to say that this is what this album is about to me.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And because it's art, like said, art is subject to interpretation. We relate to it on so many different levels. Just like I recognize myself, he recognizes aspects of himself, and the next person will recognize aspects of themselves.
Yeah.
Now with hip hop, like here's one of my gripes. It's not really a gripe, but one of the things that I used to observe when I was living in Cape Town is that whenever we went to hip hop events with Mick, I would notice that 90% of the people at the space were also artists. So it was almost as if the hip hop artists were preaching to the converted. They were speaking to other hip hop artists. How do you make your music accessible to people who are not necessarily hip hop heads? Or are you even, is that a consideration?
I don't know if it's really a consideration when it comes to making the music. I think maybe in a small way, like one of the ways of trying to bridge that is maybe having music. I think you could probably tell with the music on the album that some of it is not like traditional hip hop. Like there's a lot of jazzy influence and stuff like that. And I think in that sense, some of the songs may cross over to people who listen to certain types of music, but.
So the people you collaborate with also contribute.
Exactly, yeah. But I don't think it was a consideration in terms of me trying to cross over. I think it's mainly the music that I also gravitate towards, and the people I collaborated with. I think all of them I'm a fan of. Some of them I kind of, discovered during the making of the album, and, their contributions just kind of, came in perfectly. But then the ones that I knew beforehand, they came onto the album because I'm a fan of their music anyway.
Absolutely. Yes, it's team effort. Yes. It's not all on your shoulders, right?
No, I wouldn't be able to pull it off. Never. Never.
You speak of Ubuntu, like in one of the tracks, you talk of Ubuntu. And it's something that's so close to most of our hearts, and it's part of like our philosophy. How has that principle worked out for you now that you're no longer at home? Have you gotten a deeper understanding, appreciation for it? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think I may have mentioned it on. I mentioned it on maybe 3 tracks. Actually. Or in different ways. Like I mentioned it specifically on Two Fly, but I mentioned the idea on Kutenda, like the individual indivisible from the whole. On the way back home, I talk about this idea of color stands approaching the same bowl to eat. I feel like as an African, I think it's one of those things that kind of defines us, the idea of community. And when you leave, as I was mentioning, that lack of a support network, when you find yourself in a space where it's more an idea of individuality, self motivation and things like that. You do realize that there's a disconnect between who you are as a person and the kind of life that you're being propelled to live. But I feel like Ubuntu still for me, it's still manifested in the connections that I've made here, and also like even when we talked about like the creation of the album, that it was a team effort. Like I would never have been able to create this project, by myself, or it would have sounded very different. It wouldn't have been the thing that you're kind of relating to. So the idea of community, the idea of I am because we are. The idea of, not focusing on individual needs, but, the communal needs. And also like, I think I've always, I think mainly through the music and the kind of spaces that I ended up navigating in back home, like the kind of performance spaces, they were invariably, a lot of the times they were kind of activist spaces. And I think also like in the terms of activism, like that is the guiding principle, the idea of like healing as a community, the idea of building as a community. And I think that really encapsulates the idea of Ubuntu, and that should be the kind of thing that's guiding us forward. So yeah, when I look at it, I think leaving home kind of made me realize how powerful this concept of community is, and also trying to reconnect with the concept of community. So maybe you find it in a different way from how it would manifest when you're back home, but I think you still kind of try to connect with that.
You recognize it.
I was about to be a kind of cultural interpreter and translator here in between to say that Ubuntu is interconnectedness. It means I am because we are. In case some of the people who are listening, watching might not know that, but you were also kind of covering that matter quite well. Hey, you were talking about activism. You were talking about Zimbabwe, kind of leaving that. Of course, there's been like an amount of Zimbabwe has been going through a lot in the recent decades, and that. Do you feel like you are? What kind of position you are in as you are outside of the country to comment it? Do people want to hear a comment from somebody who has left, or have you lost that right, or is this exactly where you kind of like participating in the conversation? How are you feeling about home in that way?
Yeah, that feeling is definitely there. Like because I actually remember even before I left, like I would see the same kind of thoughts expressed by people back home, because people in the diaspora would voice kind of their opinions about movements back home, or like protests and things like that, or the situation, and people back home would be like you don't know what's going on the ground. So I used to witness that. So the minute that I left, I felt like I'd lost a certain kind of legitimacy to speak on certain issues. And I remember I'd already left by the time there were, I think it was the protests even before, the coup that led to Mugabe stepping down and whatever. And there was this challenge, this Expect Us challenge, where MCs were kind of rapping about the situation back home, and kind of motivating people to rise and things like that. And I quickly wrote a verse, but the minute I wrote the verse and recorded it, I was like, do I have the right to speak on this from the safety of living out here? Because I know that if I was back home and I recorded this verse and it's out there, I would feel a certain kind of fear, because I know how the government operates. And I remember I even asked people, I was like, yeah, so I've got this thing, but do you feel like it's okay for me to put it out there, considering that if someone back home is doing it, they would face different consequences, maybe, or depending on whether it had a kind of impact. And someone actually said, yeah, like you're out there and you have that safety, so you should use that platform. So that's why I ended up releasing it after some time. But yeah, like I really question that legitimacy of me being able to comment on things that are happening back home. And I still kind of do at this stage, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, but it's also, of course, there's many different ways of being political. And and one of these things, like I was saying, and I really can't stress it enough, but that the way that you're talking about the story of migration, of this cultural shift, and that is also incredibly political. It's an act of political commentary, because it really is reporting on on something that is very topical on the continent of Europe, but not just here, all continents, I'm sure, and it happens in various ways. So there are different ways of doing it, and I do remember that song "Expect Us." I think we did play that on Planet Earth, Planet Rap at the time.
You did, yeah.
so there was that. But I think it's like what you're saying basically is that you had a privilege, being away and being at the distance, and it's easy to be brave from the distance, but you had that privilege, so you used it for something good, something positive.
Yeah, I think I tried. Yeah, but that was the question of if you were back home, Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, and. Now that you're living abroad, or living, let's not even say abroad, but you're in Lisbon, or Portugal, right? You're in Portugal. As a Zimbabwean, do you feel like there's a burden of responsibility to be to represent Zimbabwe in a certain way?
I mean, it's not anything outright, but it just happens that in many of the spaces that I kind of navigate in, I will be the first Zimbabwean that people have met. So I think it then becomes an issue of kind of, dealing with stereotypes, because as an African, there is, the issue of stereotypes. So I think there's a constant struggle of trying to negate, these stereotypes that people have. And, it's like, I always laugh about it, but every time I say I'm Zimbabwean to people, there's always a reaction, like outright shock. Like if I could take a picture of, each time I tell someone I'm from Zimbabwe, like you'd see this wide array of like expressions, like what, and then there's the idea that people have of Africa and Africans, and so it's not like consciously I'm trying to be a kind of ambassador, but I do find myself like kind of trying to set the record straight that there's so many different stories, there's so many different cultures, there's so many of us. Like life is probably not life in Africa or Zimbabwe is probably not what you're thinking,
what you've been led to believe.
Like there are things, but there are also different things. There's other stories to it.
For sure.
What do you think you would be making music about if you were still there? Do you think that, of course it's a hypothetical question, but remember we were talking some years ago with Manifest from Ghana, and he had been starting his musical career in the United States when he was living and studying there, and then he moved to Ghana. He did kind of the other way around.
We went back.
You have done it, and his and he was talking about how in United States it was like he's African, it's Ghanaian, it's all of that stuff. And then, because we were talking about it today, how he was saying that then when he was in Ghana, like he said that they already know, you don't have to tell them, like they already know, like that's
it goes without saying.
It goes without saying, it's true.
Yeah. So do you think that if you were in Zimbabwe, if you go back to Zimbabwe, what would you make music about?
I think when I was in Zimbabwe, somehow, some way, like my music would come out with a certain kind of politics, and it was about the situation.
Yes,
the situation there, and I think that was the environment that I was in, and like the kind of MC that I had evolved into, like over time. Like I was always trying to speak about, like, reality or the situation that I was facing. So even even with my music being personal, like I think a certain aspect of it would have been kind of political and, you know, and political in the sense
The
of,
personal is political.
Yeah, true. So it would have been mainly that, I think. I definitely would not have created an album like A Travel Guide for the Broken if I had not left home. Like that, like maybe, you know, I might have created a track, you know, just kind of, you know, imagining what it would be like, but it wouldn't be so much of a personal reflection.
Yeah.
Let me briefly bring it back to the sort of vulnerability that we were talking about earlier. Now, there's a lot of the time there are like all kinds of stereotypes with men in particular and young men, but men of all ages. And I think that we are kind of like in a new time a little bit also, like we're raising two boys. One is a teenager, one is sort of like coming to 10 years old and all that. And when they listen to rap music, it's awful, I would say.
Yeah.
I was always thinking that how are children going to rebel against us because we have such an impeccable taste in music, and the answer was they're listening to this mainstream rap music. But how do we communicate? Like, how do we introduce this kind of like vulnerability to the young men, especially? I mean, I'm not ruling out girls, but nevertheless, because there's also this kind of thing, and it's still also, there's an aspect of it being very male culture, hip hop in many ways. So how do we encourage this kind of vulnerability to the young men? Is it sort of contradictory to the being young man? Is it possible?
I think it is possible, and maybe it's just me, but it feels like, you know, there is a kind of a shift around the idea of masculinity and you know, this idea of you know, boys don't cry or men don't cry or things like that, because we do see the negative effects, we do see the harmful effects. So when it comes to me personally, in my music or in my personal relationships with other guys, like I've been slowly trying to learn to like that vulnerability, and I think it sort of also inspires other people to kind of, you know, be vulnerable themselves. But yeah, as I was saying, in my personal relationships with my friends, I think there has been a kind of a whittling away of that, you know, not being able to talk about issues and things like that. I think we have been kind of trying to, like not be so manly in the sense of, you know, the idea of masculinity as it was when we were growing up. Machismo, yeah. So I don't know. Like I think it's really about how you navigate in your personal relationships. But for you being a parent, I guess it's something that you actually see with your boys, and it's something that you're kind of trying to inspire in your boys. But for me personally, it's just like about how I navigate in these spaces as a man, and, you know, also like, you know, just trying to listen more and things like that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of learning that we can do, and a lot of unlearning as well, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
It might be more unlearning even than learning. Like, I think that's really where it's at. But I will say this about this new generations. They do have vocabulary to express some of these things. Some of these things are normalized, which is already a much better thing. I think that we never sort of had that that kind of thing. It was more culturally, you know, unacceptable to talk about even just like, you know, bad mental health days or whatever else. Like, you know, so that's certainly something that is happening, and yeah, I think that there's a something new maybe is coming, and hopefully that's something good.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, the time now is we are reaching the tail end of our conversation.
I think so.
All right.
Thank you so much. This has been really great.
Well, thank you for your time. And I actually wanted to say in the beginning that, I mean, yeah, we go back 10 years, and you guys have always been supportive of, you know, the stuff that I'm doing. Whenever I have a song that I feel like, you know, this is kind of good, and maybe people need to hear it. Like you're definitely, you know, top 5 of the people that I try to reach out to with music, and I really appreciate all the support over the years.
Thank you. We appreciate your work, and I was so happy to finally get a chance to have a lengthy conversation with you in person, because it's been a long time coming. And if all things work together for good, we'll see you in person one of these days.
Yeah,
I hope.
Lisbon is waiting for you guys. Yeah, bring the family.
Yes.
That's what's up.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what's up.
yes.
Certainly is.